Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this The Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And we're jumping straight into this one. This is a video all about why I really do not like the supposedly conservative side of the rest is politics, Rory Stewart, because frankly, not only is he not a conservative and was not a conservative when he was in the Conservative Party, which I will touch on, but he has managed to make this facade of being the reasonable type of right-winger. He is effectively the type of right-winger that normie centrist dads are going to have in their head whenever they talk to anyone, and they think that generally, oh, this is what the Conservative Party should be like, rather than going with that rabble-rousing plebeian lot who want to shut down all the borders and don't like the fact that we have to pay taxes for our social contract. But this total charlatan has to be addressed, because these total morons unironically fill out stadiums. This is tens of thousands of people just to listen to Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart. And I hate Rory Stewart much more because at least Alistair Campbell doesn't hide his disdain for right-wingers behind a facade of pretending to be one of them. I mean, these two have groupies, for God's sake. I mean, to be fair, this is Alistair Campbell's daughter with a bunch of her friends, and, you know, to be fair, I know that there is a god or at least some cosmic force, because famously, Alistair Campbell's daughter is a bit of a floozy, and basically everybody knows it because there are clips of it all over the internet, but I'll save that for when I do an Alistair Campbell rant. But this is my main problem with these two. They have the facade of being the reasonable, while also cool and hip types to listen to about politics. And I even know normies that have listened to them. And as we're going to go through, you're going to see why I have tried to get them off trying to listen to them and listen to some other podcasts from the alternative media, such as Winston Marshall, even Diary of a CEO is pretty good, and Peter McCormack, who runs the Mr. Obnoxious podcasts, who are willing to actually have more difficult conversations, more than just the absolute nonsense that comes out of these two's mouths. So Rory Stewart, as I said, is known for having been a Conservative MP, though really when it comes down to it, he wasn't particularly Conservative and still isn't. On the big split in the Tory party between the wets and dries, it was a question about the European Union. And, well, Rory Stewart was instinctively supportive of a bid launched by the Labour to seize control of the parliamentary agenda to block no-deal Brexit, and I can't really be bothered reading the rest of that. I think that says enough. Because Rory Stewart, even after this, who decided to run to be Tory party leader in 2019, after losing it and being effectively kicked out of the Tory party for having no way to climb higher on the greasy pole, said that he was interested in serving in the Labour government led by Keir Starmer. Effectively, long story short, it looks like Rory Stewart is the type of person who doesn't particularly have any principles, or if he does, they're certainly left-leaning, but simply just wants to get power by any means necessary. Which, thank God he didn't, because I think he would have ruined the country given his instincts. And I can't find the extract at the moment, but I vividly remember an extract from his biography, so I hope somebody has the extract, and if you do, please send it to me either on the Discord or on Twitter, where in one of his books, he effectively says that he joined the Labour Party at first because he was instinctively left-wing, realised they weren't winning anything, so decided to join the Lib Dems because he felt more at home there or something like that, and was effectively told by a Lib Dem MP or staffer, effectively, if he wanted to be an MP, he should join the Tory party. And so guess what he did in 2019 after being a Labour member in his teenage years and expressing interest in the Lib Dems? Well, he had always considered a parliamentary career in the past, but only decided to do it when, in the aftermath of the UK parliamentary expenses scandal, David Cameron decided to reopen the Tory candidate list to anybody who wants to apply. David Cameron will never be forgiven for what he did to conservatism in the United Kingdom. And Stewart said that his experience in Afghanistan made him a Burkean conservative, which I'm yet to see any sort of Burkean conservatism from him, which of course he only said to actually get a spot as a Conservative parliamentary candidate. Because it goes on to say that he had never actually voted Tory before, which is definitely what a Burkean Conservative would do. And in fact, his parents, against his will, only voted for them in 2001 because he was away in Afghanistan, and voted for him by proxy, and basically ignored his stupid opinion, which basically everybody should do. And so he only joined in 2009, and then got selected in 2010, because apparently they were desperate for people. This is what I mean. This man is not a Conservative upon any sort of level. The only reason that he says he's a Conservative was because he was part of the party, but the only reason he was part of the party was because David Cameron decided basically not to vet anybody, and let in a load of wets. And guess what? Ruin the Tories forever, basically. Anyway, bear this all in mind as I go through my rant, because Rory Stewart is, as far as I can tell, a completely vibes-based person who isn't an idiot. I mean, the man was educated at Oxford, for God's sake, did PPE, so is, as far as I care, one of the worst types of people to become a parliamentarian. But anyway, all PPE seems to do is turn people into very good arguers who are very good at reinforcing their own position and rationalising their own position. Anyway, I say that, and this was Rory Stewart's reaction to finding out that Kamala Harris had lost the US election to Donald Trump, despite putting tens of thousands of pounds onto a bet for Harris to win, and constantly saying for months that Harris was a sure thing.
I got it totally wrong. I thought Kamala Harris would win, and I believed she would win comfortably. I thought it would be over quite quickly. Despite the polls showing 50-50. Why? Well, I can repeat my arguments. They were technical arguments about young African-American voters and how they would turn out, her ground game, the money, the performance of Biden's administration.
Yeah, see what I mean? He's rationalised himself into a position based on his own vibes. No, Rory, the polls for quite a while were largely 50-50. In fact, if they weren't 50-50, they were swinging toward Trump. The only enthusiasm that there was for Kamala Harris was in, effectively, the areas where you would expect to see it and where you would go. You know, big cities in California, New York and all that. Because that is where her voter base is. So, of course, when you only go to where her voter base is, that's all you're going to see. And realistically, especially from what I see, because I follow a lot of righties on Twitter, there was an awful lot of effort and vibes of, wow, Biden was useless and he's losing his mind. As soon as it turned out that the media couldn't hide that fact anymore, yeah, votes for Democrats will have just collapsed. Because a lot of swing voters will have thought, wow, they've tried to gaslight me for 4 years here, haven't they? But no, he focused on African-American voters, which are a minority in the US, so I don't know why he thought that that would indicate a huge amount of difference, because, frankly, African-American demographics are typically in the areas that would have Democrat wins anyway. I don't know why he thought the Biden administration was a successful one. Basically, everyone feels poor in America, as far as I can tell. But this is what I mean. Rory Stewart's whole mindset is, well, this is the vibes I'm getting, so I'm just going to try and justify it. It's not very good critical thinking, but he does actually have critical thinking ability. That's the surprising thing here, but we'll get into that.
It's all turned out to be wrong, completely wrong. I don't think, though, that I was fundamentally wrong because I'm patronising towards people.
This was by far the funniest clip from the night of the election. I know I've covered it before, but I really don't like Rory Stewart, so I'm just going to labour this point. Rory Stewart, frankly, is patronising. He is a patronising person by default, because all his vibes are left-leaning and fully fit in with the new elite temperament. So anyone that disagrees with him, he effectively does look down upon, whether he means to or not. And this is all that is coming across in this clip.
I never felt that. I never felt that as a politician in Britain. I didn't feel I was patronising towards my Brexit voting constituents. I think I was wrong because I'm an optimist.
Do you see what I mean by he's trying to rationalise his own position? Why did I get it wrong? When he's rationalising, he doesn't seem to be critically thinking of, oh, I was actually wrong on all this stuff. He says, no, my analysis was actually all right. I think I was just too optimistic about it. No, Rory, your worldview is wrong, just a matter of fact, and I have more evidence of that soon. And because of that, on top of the fact that you went to Oxford, frankly, you think that every vibe and idea that you come up with has to be correct, when realistically there are people that haven't been to Oxford and have a much better worldview than you. But as I say, because you're patronising, you absolutely cannot see that at all. It's a bit like Thunderfoot with Elon Musk, and trust me, Elon Musk will come up too. Effectively, these people's entire identity is based on how smart they are, and effectively, if some absolute moron turns out to be more correct than them in any way, say a moron predicts Trump, and he actually brings up a few things that are directly contradictory to what Rory Stewart said before, say, actually African Americans voted more for Trump this time round, which they actually did. Rory Stewart would say, no, you're just wrong, you just got lucky. When really everything Rory Stewart says basically all comes down to luck. And how he rationalises is effectively what he got his degree in. His degree was in, can you rationalise these positions? And so that's all he's learned to do. He can't solve problems, he can't critically think properly, he can only use his thought process to justify his own positions. And by the way, we're done with that clip because there's not an awful lot more to say apart from he copes and seethes, and I've covered it before anyway. But a couple of days later, you can tell he's got no introspection because he basically says the same thing on the actual Rest is Politics podcast.
My anxiety, which is that she would emerge more legitimate if she went to an open convention and genuinely competed with other people, and that would give a positive narrative. I think I was wrong on that. She's generated just as positive a narrative as she could possibly have without the internal dissension.
Once again, Rory, this is cope and seethe. You're completely wrong. No, it probably would have been better for her to try and go onto an open floor and actually get voted in, but the Democrats didn't want that because they knew that an awful lot of people had joined the Democratic Party effectively to get the antithesis of Kamala Harris, which is the pure new elite pick for all the billionaire donor class that, well, effectively want a government that is going to help with their lobbying. But again, no, Rory Stewart can't bring himself to say that because he thinks that's all that the Republicans do. But yes, this is Rory Stewart, a man who can't have any sort of introspection into his own opinions. And people come to him for informed opinions. I mean, frankly, he doesn't seem to have too many, especially on important subjects of the day. A few months ago, when 5 Just Stop Oil protesters were arrested and charged for being on a Zoom call to cause millions of pounds worth of damage by stopping the M25 motorway, which is the main motorway around London. This is what Rory and Alistair had to say about their sentences, in which they ended up in jail for years.
Well, my instinctive reaction when I heard it was, that is ridiculous. You know, we talk a lot about, and there's a big debate going on about the prisons at the moment because we're having to let lots of people out early because of prison capacity. I understand the anger that there is, but this was people who were planning protests. And I hope that one of the things that Labour maybe signals early on is that whilst they accept that people get frustrated by protest, that the right to protest has got to be a fundamental part of our democracy.
So that's Alistair Campbell's reasoning, effectively. Oh, they were just planning protests, our prisons are already full. Why are they giving them years in prison? And that's all they really had to say on it, is what are your instincts? Well, to be fair to Rory Stewart, I clipped it out. He does say, I feel a bit uncomfortable answering a question I don't have the full information from, which, by the way, is clearly a lie because he's been talking about the US elections for months and got it completely wrong because he didn't know anything about it. But despite saying that, he just chirp in here.
So my instinct is really against it.
Yeah, I mean, it does, without us sounding too sort of cliched liberal on this, they've literally been given these sentences, very long sentences, for plotting something over a Zoom call. What they were plotting to do, I think, is to climb over onto the M25 and stop people driving up the M25. Now,
yeah, Rory Stewart, pretty much the same. Oh, I don't want to sound too liberal. Well, you're always going to, because effectively, frankly, you and Alistair Campbell have more or less the same politics. The only real difference is that Rory Stewart isn't as wedded to supporting Labour as Alistair Campbell is, because Alistair Campbell basically is New Labour in a man. And New Labour has effectively been the policies we've had for the past 20 years. As much as they hate the Tories, it's because their rhetoric is not quite the Tony Blair type. However, as you can see, Rory Stewart, exactly the same opinion. Yeah, I don't think they should be in jail. All they were trying to do was protest and stop the M25. Again, we'll go into it, but it wasn't very hard to actually look into this.
I remember, obviously, this comes from the context of both Conservative and Labour politicians going out, and Keir Starmer was doing this too, pretty illiberal statements. We can't have these people shutting down our things, they need to be dealt with, and presumably the judge is responding to those kind of legislation. But it is worrying, and it's worrying because it will also have huge implications in other countries where climate and environmental protesters could find themselves in real trouble from authoritarian regimes, locking them up, then being able to point to Britain and saying, well, if Britain's giving people, 5-year sentences for going on a Zoom call talking about stopping people driving down the M25, I think this is pretty sad. And it will...
You get the idea there, but frankly, I covered this topic, and there were sentencing notes, which are given and written out effectively to let the public know exactly why the decision has been made and how the judge got to it. And the back of a fag packet summary of that is effectively these were 5 people who were planning a mass protest that eventually led to over £1 million worth of damage, There were people on the way to hospital who got stopped. There was a taxi driver who was nearly attacked by a special needs child who was on his way to school. A lorry with food for a hospital ended up having to stop for a few hours and some of it got spoiled. Effectively, yes, these people absolutely deserve that jail time. And other people noticed that this was a very ill-informed opinion too that is effectively just rationalising their own vibes. So Faisal Sadiq, who I believe is a KC, which is just a very senior British lawyer, said that he was really disappointed that Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell chose in the rest of his politics to discuss the sentences handed down in R.V. Hallam without bothering to read the published sentencing notes of HHJ Hahir. It's rather like criticising a speech without actually listening to it. To which Alistair Campbell basically said, yeah, we didn't read it, but if we read every document related to every subject we discuss, we would never sleep. The question was what my instinctive reaction was, so feel free to educate me, which is a very annoying answer because I do this channel in my free time and I managed to read it and it wasn't even 100 paragraphs. It is literally something you can skim, find the details of why these people were being put in jail, and then have a much more informed opinion on it. And Rory Stewart, as far as I can find, didn't actually have anything to say about this particular question from Faisal. So I think it's safe to assume that Rory's reply would not be too far away from what Alistair Campbell has said here, which again fits right in with his attitude, which is, oh, I've got all my vibes, I'm going to rationalise them all. Why are you expecting a professional political podcast to do its research before it tries to give informed opinions on things? Well, because at the end of the day, the opinions that you are giving are absolutely terrible, and it should be your job to at least be accurate with your analysis, which, from the clips on major things I've given here, are completely wrong, but you actually start to go into his opinions on climate cultists and climate change and things like that. Again, it's all just classic New Elite positions. So if we were serious about addressing the climate catastrophe, again, climate catastrophe already clearly leaning on the side of the climate cultists, we would be focusing far more on the G20 who are creating the problem and less on the unanimity at COP. 9 years after Paris, we are still putting more and more carbon into the atmosphere every year. Now, the only benefit of a doubt I can give him here is to say when he says we, he means the G20, but I don't think he does. I think by we, he means the United Kingdom. And again, this is completely misinformed dross. When it comes to the last sentence, he is absolutely right. We do need to concentrate on the G20 who are quote-unquote creating the problem. But even then, you have to be really specific. It's mainly China and India, and to some extent America, now that they're a net exporter. And, you know, these are the type of people as well to go on about, oh, Norway's social care system is absolutely great. Well, the only reason they can afford that is because they're exporting a load of fossil fuels. Anyway, that aside, the point I was going to make is that we are not creating the problem. Our carbon emissions, according to the Spectator data tracker, are below what it was during the height of the Industrial Revolution. Our carbon emissions have been absolutely plummeting, and there is never any acknowledgement of this from anyone in the New Elite, despite the fact that effectively the whole of the UK is paying for it through net zero taxes, subsidies for green companies, and of course the highest energy bills in basically all of the Western world, because we are mental. But no, according to Rory Stewart, still not enough. And if it's not nonsense leftism about the climate catastrophe, it's ridiculous leftism on democracy, bearing in mind that Rory was doing his best to stop Brexit. Rory says here we desperately need radical reform in all our countries, but for governments to take the risk, they need far more trust and understanding from citizens, so we want to make use of citizens' assemblies. Now, the only type of people that push for citizens' assemblies are mental leftists, as I say. They are massively pushed by climate cultists. And effectively the whole idea of it is that you massively empower councils even more than they are already empowered. But instead of having elected councillors to represent the local community, instead you basically have referendums every time the council wants to do something, like have a site for, I don't know, a wind farm or something. And effectively the plan from the Green lot is, they keep saying that, oh, people will really want this, which I don't think they will, but effectively they let the masks slip an awful lot, and I've covered this in previous videos, and effectively they'd want to lobby it with their own activists so they'd win every single vote in these citizens' assemblies. But again, this is the sort of vibe thing from the New Elite that, yeah, that sounds good, democracy. Yeah, democracy is great. Screw Brexit, though, but democracy is good. The more democracy we have, the betterer things are. And this is where Rory Stewart is, and as I say, because of his PPE degree at Oxford, the best he can do is rationalise his vibes. Anyway, as mentioned before, Elon Musk is brought up. So Elon Musk says in this quoted tweet, "The power of the unelected federal bureaucracy has grown to become an unconstitutional fourth branch of government, especially with the creation of their own internal court system. It has become the most powerful branch of government and they must fix this, and this is half of the point of Doge." So Rory Stewart has said, but who gets to debate with Elon Musk and ask the next level of questions, such as whether elections are always the answer for every part of government? A polite invitation perhaps for an interview on the rest is politics. Which I find absolutely amazing given that Rory Stewart is apparently someone who wants citizens' assemblies, but as I say, the mask slips every time. Reveal preference. When it comes to Brexit, he was trying to stop it, so he doesn't particularly like democracy, and instead, as I say, wants this new elite class of bureaucracy that takes over government, because effectively he wants an aristocracy of people who think like him. And he doesn't realise that he has it, and has had it for nigh on 30 years or so. I mean, hell, he was part of the Conservative Party, as it was full of people like him. But either way, I find it ridiculous that to even insinuate that Elon Musk has not been interviewed about things like this. He has been happy to go on interviews. He's been on Joe Rogan, he's had interviews with the BBC, and obviously Rory Stewart's doing this to effectively try and get Elon Musk on his podcast, which I think he should do, because I think he will absolutely trounce them. But it just goes to show that Rory Stewart, he always lets the mask slip, and he will just change his opinion one day to another based on vibes, based on who he's talking to, talking about, and has rational arguments for absolutely everything he puts forward, even if they're completely contradictory. But the real reason that I made this video today is what we're getting onto now, which again is about Elon Musk, and Elon Musk saying that only the ADF can save Germany, and once again, Rory Stewart is quote tweeting someone, Chris Murphy, a US Senator for Connecticut, who said, "The AFD's mission is to rehabilitate the image of the Nazi movement. One leader's license plate is an open tribute to Hitler." My god, I need to Google that. It's because of this, by the way. It's because this license plate says AH, even though that kind of looks like an M, but I'm pretty sure it's a H. 1818, the 1 being the A and the 8 being the H, yet again twice. I mean, I think that this is quite a bit of a reach, to be honest. It wouldn't be the first time that I have seen a controversy because of a unlucky license plate, but if this is where you want to go with it, fine, I will just see you as mad. And apparently a top official said about migrants that you can always shoot them later or gas them. Maybe he did. Context needed, I suppose. Another described Judaism as the inner enemy of Germany. And obviously Rory Stewart has quote tweeted this, saying that, oh, Elon Musk says that the ADF can save Germany, but when are people going to wake up to the direction in which Musk is pushing things? This was, of course, said literally a day before a Saudi Arabian migrant rammed through a Christmas market, so leaving poor timing aside, there's this whole thing of the new elite will only look at one side of the story, because frankly, I don't believe any of the stuff that Chris Murphy has said there, or at the very least it'll be a reach, and there's a very good reason for that. This is Alice Weidel, the ADF leader. Oh, and this is her Sri Lankan wife, Sarah Bazard. So I am apparently supposed to believe that a party that is apparently trying to rejuvenate the Nazi movement over in Germany has a mixed-race lesbian couple as their leaders. Well, only one of them's their leader, but still, you get the point. You can understand why I'd be a bit sceptical about any of this, but once again, Rory Stewart doesn't look into any of this. He just sees a US senator, presumably Democrat, who has made a load of accusations and just goes, yeah, that's probably all true. Elon Musk is evil after all. And then the reality hits you that actually there's a lesbian mixed race couple as their leader, and all of a sudden basically everything you've heard about the ADF probably isn't true. I should probably be more specific on this. This isn't actually her wife, it is her civil partner. She does not believe in gay marriage. But either way, that was a very standard position for basically everyone to have back in 2008 or before, whenever basically the whole world decided that, yeah, gay marriage is fine, actually. And then a load of conservatives all over the world lost their mind. Not Rory Stewart, though, because he's not really a conservative. Anyway, Rory Stewart decides to carry on his reach and retweets Zoe Gardner, who is a migrant lobbyist, smearing the ADF by saying, oh my god, this is a real poster, I can't believe this is a real poster, with the obvious implication that this is a poster with a couple doing a Nazi salute, when anyone who isn't an idiot will see that, one, it's a stock photo, two, it is a couple making a roof over the head of children. And I believe that German, even though mine is very rusty and I've used Google Translate, effectively means we will protect your children. But no, Rory Stewart has gone along with this. This is clearly two people doing a Nazi salute in the middle of Germany, because that's clearly what they're going for, and says people including Musk are choosing not to see this. No, Rory, you are seeing dog whistles everywhere because the new elite needs to see dog whistles or Nazis everywhere, otherwise you wouldn't have anything to talk about, frankly. But to be honest with you, there's probably another layer to this absolute ridiculousness, in that because this is the astroturfed podcast of the new elite centrist dads who all love Angela Merkel for some reason, including my dad, who's very much to the right of centrist dads. They managed to get her on for an interview, and I've not watched any of it. I'm not going to watch any of it, but they're obviously going into it very friendly, and I have absolutely no doubts that they are not going to challenge her at all on the immigration issues that she caused in Germany, including the massive amount of rapes in Cologne back in, I think it was 2017 maybe, might have been 2016, can't really remember. No, none of that. This is all softball interview questions, effectively patting her on the back. How can you tell this? Well, look at the subjects they're going through. 2008 financial crash, Eurozone crisis. It'll all be, oh, you've done very well here. Oh, isn't Putin a bad man? Isn't China a bit worrying? Oh, Brexit was terrible, wasn't it? Trump's even worse. How did you manage COVID? Nothing about the immigration issue at all. And if she went on any alternative podcast, or if she even got interviewed by Douglas Murray, it would be infinitely more interesting than what this is going to be. But no, this is a podcast that is just there to push the new elite agenda, and that's pretty much it. Push Labour a little bit, maybe go a bit hardball so that it still looks like Rory Stewart's not quite on the side of Labour, but ultimately, at the end of the day, the overall direction this podcast wants things to go is in the new elite direction. So you get a new elite on Angela Merkel easily because it's going to be nothing but softball questions. And this is also why Rory Stewart is probably pushing against the ADF, because that's the opposite of the new elite, and they hated Merkel, even though Merkel effectively created them because of the disaster that she caused with immigration. But having said all this, I'd say the most disappointing thing about Rory Stewart is the fact that actually he can go against the grain sometimes. And the thing I find more disappointing is that I can only see this as him trying to put up his, oh, I'm actually a conservative facade. I don't think he's doing it because he is trying to give fair and balanced analysis. My example of this, to start off with, is how he goes on about the Hunter Biden pardon.
Which is worse, Hunter Biden or Charles Kushner?
So I'm going to really annoy you and most of the audience by saying Hunter Biden's worse.
Oh.
I think it's totally shocking that Joe Biden has pardoned his son. It's unforgivable, and it feels to me corrupt.
As I say, very well done, Rory Stewart. But once again, the reason I feel that this is very much a facade is because effectively this was low-hanging fruit. Whenever it's something where there's a bit of 50-50 on, he's pretty much okay with the new elite, I mean. He's obviously okay to say, oh yeah, this is hypocritical of the left, because effectively that's about as far as you can safely go into conservative territory without being effectively called a racist or fascist. And again, it can give centrist dads this air of, oh yeah, see, they don't agree on everything, when in reality, the one or two issues I'll disagree on are nothing. It doesn't matter if you think the Kushner pardon or the Hunter Biden pardon was worse. Everyone thinks they're both bad.
The idea of using your position as president to pardon your own son from a criminal offence, I mean, what the hell does that say about the rule of law?
Damn fine stuff, and he does push back on Alistair Campbell, who is obviously the type to say Trump does everything wrong, but Biden's been fine here. Effectively, Alistair Campbell says he doesn't like the optics, and Rory Stewart does push back, and as I say, they do need things that they disagree on, otherwise it will become very boring, but as I say, it feels like a facade because it's only on the really easy topics that Rory Stewart will actually be like this. Though again, to be absolutely fair to him, I did see one of my absolute favourite interviews with Rachel Reeves before the election from Rory Stewart. This is probably the only time I've been genuinely impressed by him.
And you're going to have to find, presumably, 3% above inflation every year for this year and every year to go to begin to keep up with the existing level of demand. How do we fund this? How do we keep... Education's easier than health.
I mean, this could have been said in 1997 as well. You know, the NHS, you can't rescue it, it's not going to work.
We know what happened there.
Yeah,
but Gordon Brown borrowed an enormous amount of money, and then the 2008 financial crisis came around, and we ended up in a bit of trouble.
Absolutely perfect stuff here, as far as I'm concerned. Excellent way to drive the interview. And to be honest, that's basically exactly what's happening right now. we're probably going to walk into another financial crash, because this question of how do you actually fund your expenses gets answered. And apparently it was, well, we're not actually going to follow our manifesto at all. We're going to put up national insurance contributions from employers. And now people are getting fired. There's people in my comments when I've talked about this saying, yeah, I know people that have been fired. Job opportunities have gone down. The cost of borrowing's gone up. As Rory Stewart says, yeah, you go down this route, you end up having to borrow more, and then it gets more expensive to borrow. It's exactly what's happened.
So there is a way of doing this.
Well, wait a second. Like, what was borrowing? Just remind me what government debt was when Labour lost office in 2010, Rory. What was it as a percentage of GDP?
So there was a deficit running at 130 billion at the point where they went, right?
And debt as a share of GDP was 60%. What is it now, Rory?
It's higher, but I'm
Yeah,
not.
it's nearly 100% of GDP. So I don't need lectures, Rory. I don't need lectures from you.
Lecturing. I'm not particularly lecturing you. You're asking me how did they do it? They did it by borrowing a lot of money, and you're not going to do that.
Right,
you
well,
just
this
said you
government
won't
have
borrow.
borrowed a lot of money, and things are an absolute mess. It's about how you run things.
I'm totally on Rory Stewart's side. He's just being attacked by Rachel Reeves because she has no answer here. Absolutely no answer. And as I say, this is the only time I've seen him be genuinely impressive, and I think he actually knows what he's talking about. I presume because he probably did some economics modules when he was doing his PP at Oxford. And I'm completely with his reaction, because frankly she is blaming him for putting the debt to GDP ratio at nearly 100%. But Rory's whole point is, okay, well, this is the position you found yourself in. You can't borrow any more money, but you've not told me where you're actually going to get the extra 3% of funding for the NHS from, as a percentage of either the spending on health now or spending as a total GDP. I can't really remember. It doesn't really matter. Point is that it's an unfunded public spending rise. And that's all Rory Stewart's point is. But he's just being attacked by it. But he does very well to bring it back to the point.
And that's why Wes talks about... You've asked a question.
Okay.
So it's also about how you run things. And that's why Wes has spoken about reform of public services rather than just money. But it's also why we've set out how we will tax the non-doms properly, which your party's had 14 years to do and never has.
Tiny amounts of money, Rachel. Tiny amounts.
$5 billion a year.
Tiny amounts
They
for the
think
NHS.
£5 billion is a small amount of money.
For what you need for the NHS,
come on,
yes.
Rory.
For what you need for the NHS,
Well, we're
yes.
committed.
She goes on to say what's in the manifesto and doesn't really answer the question. But yes, just stopping the non-dom tax loophole, whatever you want to call it, bringing in nowhere near the amount of money that's needed, hence we're in the mess we're in now. As I say, that is about the only compliment I can really give Rory Stewart throughout this. Sometimes he's on the money because his instincts are right. Apparently, on some subjects of economics, which I am presuming is mainly where his modules went when he did his PPE at Oxford. So maybe he's not absolutely terrible on that, or at least understanding that the public purse needs to be balanced. Anyway, I thought I'd end on a nice note with Rory Stewart there, but ultimately at the end of the day, I made a tweet earlier today that I think really does sum up how I feel about Rory Stewart at the moment, which, to summarise politely, is quite clear that Rory Stewart has effectively been astroturfed, mainly because he is a nice face of the new elite, and is very good at intellectualising and rationalising the arguments from the new elite, with every now and then him obviously not going with the narrative, but they can't really push every narrative because some will just break up on impact. And so the day his astroturfing is over is the day I'll be very happy, because we need proper critical analysis from our punditry class. And you simply don't get that with Rory Stewart. You get the odd good take on public spending policy, but it's just not worth his completely uninformed opinions the rest of the time. Anyway, as I say, I basically just wanted to make a bit of a rant on Christmas Eve, because it's been a very stressful time leading up to Christmas, as I'm sure it will have been for you too. Anyway, with that I will leave it there. Obviously, a very Merry Christmas to all of you. I know some of you actually watch this stuff with friends, family, and I've even heard some of your mums are into this, so happy Christmas to all those other people too. As I say, I will be making videos as and when I can. Obviously, over the Christmas period, it's going to be a bit hectic, so I'll see what I can do. But hey, I managed to make this one, so Merry Christmas to that. Streams will return on the 3rd of January, where we will be returning with Laughing at the Guardian with a guest from the Lotus Eater, so look forward to that. Monday, the 6th of January, we will return with the Antiquity stream run by me over at the Worcester Club, where Jack, a friend of the channel, goes through very, very, very fine detail over, at the moment, the Peloponnesian War, but we're going into Roman history and all that later in the year too. 7th of January we will be returning with Tosh Talks, and the topic will be effectively the Worcester Club making a bingo card for 2025. It's effectively to say what our predictions are. But with that, for now, if you want to help the channel, do subscribe, leave a comment, become a channel member. I have over 20 members now. It's all looking up. This really does make me want to make more and more videos, so it's a good way to do it. But you can also send super chats and super thanks either in the comments of any video or when I'm doing my fortnightly live streams. But obviously, completely up to you, completely optional. You just get your name in the description of every video at the moment. But maybe there will be more things to do as time goes on and as I get more members. I also have a couple of Discords, links down below. I'm mainly active on the Worcester Club, but I also have my own personal Discord as well, run with my girlfriend, where there's the odd conversation in there, so join them if you're interested. But with that, that's everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, have a very Merry Christmas and goodbye.